I'm so grateful to have the opportunity to introduce my good friend, Helen Adeosun, the CEO and co-founder of CareAcademy. I've had the opportunity to know Helen for a few years now. Helen is one of the most passionate, committed founders I've ever met. Talk about founder market fit. She is so committed to the space, the customers, and the end users of her product, more so than almost any founder I've ever had the chance to meet. She gave me the opportunity to help her scrap together a financial model way back when, and I sure hope she's not still using it today. Helen recently closed an incredible Series A, a $9 million Series A round, led by some incredible funds, including Impact America. Again, Helen is one of the most impressive founders and really just one of the most passionate people I've had the chance to work with over my short career in venture. And I'm so grateful that she's taking the time to share her experience with everyone today. So with that, I will turn it over to you, Helen.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Quite the setup there, Stephen. That's amazing. Thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Helen. I'm really excited to get to speak with you all today. I realize it's about everyone's time on here. You're all busy founders, and so I want to skip as much of the BS as possible and really talk about some of the things that I have noted that have been really helpful in my own experience, in my own journey, and then get to your questions. I often find that as I've been building myself, that it's always really helpful to have the time to ask questions, because I don't think that startups are necessarily snowflakes, but all of you are individually doing a very specific and special thing, and so context matters. So I want to leave as much room for questions as possible. And Stephen, just as a reminder, can you stop me by at least, it's 4:30 my time, just so we can get to the remainder of time for questions. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, everyone, for taking time out of your busy schedule. Let's see if I can make it worth your while. All right, great. Okay, present screen. All right, so as Stephen mentioned, I think it's always helpful to provide context. Context is everything, and I always like to start off with a very short snippet of my own story. I believe, and I'll talk about this a little bit in my presentation, but I think the biggest and the best currency that you have as a founder is always your story. The story of who you are, the story of where you're headed, the story of what you want to build and why it matters is absolutely key. And so I practice whenever possible telling my own story. My name is Helen Adeosun. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. My parents immigrated from Nigeria about 20 years ago, and they came here to seek a better life. My dad came with not that much in his pocket, was just a broke college student at the time. And I always call myself the surprise baby. I've been full of surprises ever since. He was part of a legacy of entrepreneurship. And so my dad was very entrepreneurial, my grandparents were entrepreneurial, and my grandmother, with just a sixth grade education, was one of the largest textile traders in Lagos at the time. And I have kept stories like hers, stories like my father's, because they're in part the legacy that predate me and I think lead to myself as a founder. And foundership, if anything, is about the journey. I think we get so caught up in talking about companies and lionizing people, but I've had a series and a string of failures as many times as I've had, more times actually that I've had successes in my lifetime, and I wear them as a badge of honor because I've learned to focus more so on the journey and the muscle of entrepreneurship, right? I don't know if everyone, goes to the gym. I go to the gym. If it hurts, it's working. Because you're building better, right? You're building that muscle. So I consider entrepreneurship, if anything, a muscle. But it's really something that I've taken in and I've really applied towards my company and my life in terms of how we're building and how we're building intentionally as possible and what CareAcademy could be. And just a short synopsis. So CareAcademy is an online platform. We provide online professional development and upskilling. My experience as an educator and a caregiver led me to the path of building CareAcademy because we just saw that there was such a great need for building in the potential and investing in the futures of direct care workers. And if any of you all have older adult family members or grandparents who've ever had a caregiver, they're very important, but unfortunately, more often than not, they receive very little in the way of training. With COVID, that's changing, and so CareAcademy is not only building a product that can help scale and change millions of lives, not only the people who are receiving care, but the people who are giving it as well. And so I am very passionate and committed within healthcare issues, caregiving issues, having been one myself, and for our customers as well. So moving on, I think some key points for today and what I wanted to provide as feedback is my story as an entrepreneur, the importance of telling your story, fundraising, and talking a little bit about that, hiring and firing employees. I think they're actually part of the same, they're different sides of the same coin. If you prepare well to hire, you can also do well in terms of letting folks go and doing it with dignity. And I'll tell a couple stories along the way. Goal setting and prioritizing. After story, I think that's the most important thing, and is how companies goal set. When you're finding product market fit, your goal is only product market fit, but beyond that, there's a need to goal set intentionally, especially as your company scales. The folks at Spiro told me a lot of you folks are seed or just at seed, or maybe some Series A. For your companies, this is really, really important. And then the startup of you. I think we're so busy building companies that very often we forget that the first startup and you need to build is of yourself as your founder and your CEO or co-founder, whatever that may be, in order to build really successful companies, or at least more importantly, I think, building a successful journey of entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship, again, is a journey. Just by way, I think also of setting out some of the story here. So our CareAcademy story is not as pretty and as linear as it appears here. I think that there's always that tried and true comic of, this is how I wish entrepreneurship was, and this is the squiggly line is really your entrepreneurship journey. But my co-founder and I really actually started building before this in 2013, 2012, and really learning the lessons. I'll lay it all bare for you all, because I think that I always want to model what I think needs to happen in entrepreneurship, and being just completely honest and very transparent, so folks see themselves in the stories that you tell. So I came to Boston to attend the Harvard Graduate School of Education. In 2012, I left with my master's, and I call myself a reluctant founder. I never saw myself as someone who necessarily was going to start a company. I'd had grandparents who were full of chutzpah and were amazing, but I didn't necessarily see that for myself. I was a policy wonk. I loved writing papers, and I loved thinking about law, and I loved thinking about education. But at this very same time, the iLab here in Boston had opened up, and I just wanted to learn more. I started, taking the steps, but the steps were very small and very incremental. I spent maybe between 2012 and 2014 almost in a state of anxiety of where should I go and how do I start. And then I just started meeting other people. And I think one of the things that is a big takeaway always for me is building up your circle of other entrepreneurs. If you don't have a startup group or no more than 2 startup CEOs or have someone in a cohort, I really strongly suggest you find those folks, because those are the people who will cheer the loudest for you and also encourage you when it's really hard. And so by 2015, 2016 is actually when I met my co-founder. I met her on a website. We didn't meet at Harvard. The 2 Harvard logos are there because it looks very, very nice. We actually met on a website called Founder Dating. But we actually spent time as advisor. She spent time as an advisor to my company before we got started. And that was valuable, one, because co-foundership is I think next to marriage, something that is like so intimate because you're sharing so much of your time and space building something. So if you all are in the midst of your version of co-founder dating or figuring out what comes next to your relationship with a founder, I really suggest this form of getting to know someone, getting to know them in the context of your company before building together. And so beyond that, we raised that initial Techstars Series Seed, and that was wonderful. But I will also say, for those of you who are going between the seed and the Series A, it is very difficult. The majority of companies, especially at that stage, aren't able to do it. And we raised, and I put that up top, we raised a bunch of rounds that we can, shorter rounds, smaller rounds, to get us in between, just because, finding product market fit and then the effort of scaling can be really tremendously hard and difficult. So one of the things that I always keep in mind is, even now as a company, we've raised an A very recently, but always making sure that you as a CEO and the founder have eyes on the bank account, right? And making sure that you have a way to keep the lights on. And so the biggest takeaway, I think, in terms of thinking about our story, thinking about sort of where we fit and where we are right now, is in light of just 3 points that one of our investors said to me, and I'll never forget, because it's true today, it'll be true tomorrow, it's true yesterday, that your job as a founder CEO are just 3 things. 1, making sure you have the right people. 2, making sure you have the money in the bank. And 3, that you're setting the right strategy. Those are the only 3 things that will always be the job of the CEO, the founder especially. And if you're doing those right, and those are harder than they sound, then you are on your way to building something that is quite successful. So this is just context, if anything, but it's a lot longer for us, and I'm unashamed of saying that, and that there's, just the act of staying alive for a lot of companies is really hard. And so it's the lessons learned along the way and how you build those in so you can build stronger and you can build faster. So as I was saying, I think there are lots of comics that talk about, or lots of different visuals that talk about this building, right? But starting a startup is what you think it's like, what it's really like, what it feels like, and what you wish it was like. And today, that can change on a day-to-day basis, but today it feels really good. We're excited about what we have going on ahead, but I will be very honest with you in that it felt like this third piece right here, what it feels like some days. So, and a saying that I just have for myself, and I have to keep this in mind, it's not, again, it's day to day, that entrepreneurship is not magic, right? We lionize people through TechCrunch. We, shout out their name on Crunchbase, but it's not magic, right? Behind all of those stories are people who had lots and lots of failures or struck out and maybe are striking out as you know, they've been announcing that fundraising round. But it's a muscle that you build by developing curiosity and discipline. You're building a mindset because no one is born being a CEO or founder, right? So those are all just sort of things to keep in mind. I don't know, Stephen, do you know what this squiggly red line is? It's like.
No, I have no clue. I don't know if that's where that's going.
Okay.
It looks
all right,
good.
Ignore the squiggly. Oh yeah, totally.
You're up into the
We were like, what is that squiggly red line? I was like, I promise you guys I didn't do that. So the first thing, just in terms of imparting the things that carry me through, so I realize that the theme of, you know, why we're all here today is don't quit. For me, it's not only about being able to tell your story, it's also about taking in stories. I don't know about you guys, I love story time as a kid. I was the kid who was like, I want 4, 5, 7 books, right? And my dad made up stories. Like, my dad is a car salesman, so he's naturally a very good salesperson. And the reason that I have Barack Obama here today is because it's not just about Barack Obama, how, you know, and how awesome he is and how great of a storyteller he is, but also the very particular moment that he's pictured in. The first time I ever came to Boston was as a sophomore in college for the Democratic National Convention. I was bored out of my mind. Everything was expensive. I didn't know what I was doing there, but this night that he spoke, the energy was incredible. And at this point in his life, he'd failed multiple campaigns, had, you know, most of his law professors, even at Harvard, could never have imagined he kind of inhabit the stage that he took. But everyone says that this is the moment that created Barack Obama and the idea of his presidency in everyone's mind who saw or was at the convention stage or convention that night. And so that is, I think, the power of a story that I think folks get so caught up in, you know, what the product, the finished product, the finished company, you know, Apple, and we lionize, we tell ourselves stories of magnificence. And you are capable of that in your company, but you start out with only the story, right? And I think it's protecting those stories, being able to tell those stories well and project those stories out are absolutely critical to foundership. So stories aren't just for other people, they're for you. In fact, I'd even say they're for you first, right? You've got to believe whatever story that you're projecting to the world. We believe, and we announced it during our Series A fundraise, that we were going to be the company that skills 1 million new direct care workers into the U.S. labor market, straight out right now, right? That we're going to work on this. We're going to make this, you know, something that's feasible and doable. And that is, you know, that number keeps us up, but it also keeps us grounded to the work that has to happen on a day-to-day to get there. So they're for you. And so tell those stories and get in the habit of telling the story internally as well, because other people start to take that in. That is the first form of currency, not only for investors, it actually helps you get customers, it helps you get the talent. I remember, just by way of quick storytelling, in 2017, it was at that point my co-founder and myself, and we had the opportunity to pitch a very large corporate, and they said, look, we want to do a pilot with you. You know, we heard about you through this network, tell us your price, right? And so before sending over the price for you to utilize in CareAcademy, we put down a price of over like $500,000, right? And this company is only 2 people. And in my mind, it was the very fact that we were growing into the type of company that we would be that justified what we could do with this corporate. And that's when it counts, right? Those stories count because then it projects your ability to sell into customers and then also name your price and make sure that it's a good price. And don't lie. So what I'm not proposing in all of this is that by any means anyone is lying, but it's about authenticity. People love a vision. You need a vision. So practice storytelling everywhere. So internally and externally of your organization, write it down because your story is the biggest currency that you'll have when you have absolutely nothing. This company started with the bare remnants of my 401k, and at some point that wasn't there anymore. And so for me, it's always keeping in mind that our story and where we're going as a company and where we need to go is the most important thing. So the fundraising process. So I believe, and again, I love Crunchbase, I love TechCrunch. So if I keep putting those in juxtaposition to some of the examples I'm making, I'm not calling them out by any means. We appreciate it. In fact, here is our Series A announcement in June 11th of Crunchbase. And I think that I'm excited for this because what we're trying to signal intentionally is that, look, we're a Series A company, we're scaling, we're able to do all of these things. But I also think that as an entrepreneur on the other side, Helen in 2017, 2016, seeing this, got so intimidated, right? I could not have imagined that we could have spoken or projected into getting this amount, right? And no matter where you are, I don't want you to lose sight of the fact that I believe already, if you need to hear it, that you can do this, right? It's about, though, learning about the process and also about consistency. So don't get caught up in the number. It's more so about the process that led into that fundraising announcement. And so what I'm showing you here, I've omitted names. So sorry, guys, you guys don't get that unless we connect. I'm happy to connect on LinkedIn and provide insights into that. But what I have here is our spreadsheet. And so this spreadsheet is an ever-living spreadsheet of every single fundraise that we've ever done. And, it essentially has the names of folks when we reach out to them. It's essentially my CRM. Some folks do this on HubSpot. Some folks do this in Google Docs. I really recommend Google Docs just because you can edit it with multiple people. But what matters behind this really ugly spreadsheet is also the process. So in November is when I knew that I wanted to go out and, actually before that, I would actually say about January of last year is when we said we were going to go raise a Series A. So the process of getting to that was going to go first talk to our board and our current investors and showing them for the potential opportunities. You have to get the family sort of rallied around in order to move forward with a fundraise, right? It's the most effective way because those folks can then also become part of the round, et cetera, et cetera. So what I suggest is before you have to go out and raise, if you just raised an A or a seed, congratulations, you need to make sure that your inner circle is with you and they're also your biggest allies. As we were fundraising and incorporating our board, what actually ended up happening is people started to fundraise on our behalf, right? So we told the story well, we knew what we were going after, we had the numbers and the traction, but it's not enough anymore to have just a traction, quite honestly. It's the story, right? What are we building towards? And so we had board members who were actively recruiting other investors into our pipeline, other entrepreneurs in my friendship circles who were saying, hey, you need to look at CareAcademy, they're building X, Y, and Z, and we think this would be a really great opportunity for you. So, and then as part of the process, I was letting folks know on a monthly basis what we're doing, what we're going after, and also building a process by which every single day from roughly about June of last year until November of last year, I was, any contacts that I'd made went onto the spreadsheet. And then from November on, it was at least every afternoon going back and systematically prioritizing. So that green means people were ready to go, and the yellow means that people were, and then there's red further down of people who said no. So building in processes, especially as a woman of color, Black woman who's fundraising, the odds are for any entrepreneur against you. For people who live at intersectionality are even more so against you. And so the way in which you build is by showing up early and showing up often and showing up prepared. So for me, this spreadsheet became the thing that we lived and died by, right? It's about, at this point, it's just about salesmanship. So a lot of the pain that I felt about whether or not people loved our baby or may have rejected me because of XYZ reason, or because there might be some layer of bias involved in the process, I had to navigate by way of creating processes. And those processes are not just for your team and your raise, but they're really for yourself. They're, for me, the way that I kept sane in the midst of, going out and talking to a lot of investors. It was all basically treated like a sales process. I told you guys my dad's a car salesman, and so literally it was, we reached out to 15, we got 5, all right, what are the next steps? And then how do I have the network work for me? And I can talk more about that and talk more specifically. But in terms of the audience today, I know a lot of you just finished the Series Seed. So make sure you have a sense of what's next. I think what kills people is that you get to a place where you need money, and that's not necessarily a reason to go raise the Series A or Series B, right? People don't want to hear you need money. It is more so about what are you projecting out into the future and how do they fit into it. So make sure that as soon as you close the door on that, you know the metrics and what valuation, you're at least aware of what the next step looks like. For us, it was having down our LTV CAC. For us, it was also, what is our go-to-market strategy, and how did we think about our go-to-market strategy for different segments of the market? We had an answer for that way before we raised, and so every month was just showing that that was true. So know the metrics of getting to the next stage, even if you're not there yet, right? At least you're thinking about them, and you build those processes into your companies. Add people and create a discipline to an everlasting spreadsheet. So adding those contacts and set those goals for your time, because process trumps everything. I've found that true in entrepreneurship. I found that true in fundraising, that, you create a process and you make the process work. That's everything. Create a process also in a deadline for your raise. So what I mean by that is, yes, I know that we're in the midst of a pandemic. Trust me, we signed our term sheet the same day that the WHO announced that coronavirus was a thing, a pandemic, more than a thing, a pandemic. And in my mind, in November, we said, all right, this is going to take, we need to create a process because I can't spend the majority of my time on this. This is going to be a 6-month process. And 3 to 6 months is an average raise. Some take more than that. But knowing what we've gone through our seed financing, I resigned myself to saying, look, what I'm essentially saying to myself is, if we're going to go out and raise a Series A in 6 months, I'm going to extricate myself from my company. And it's essentially, I'll be honest here, it's a little on autopilot, right? We have our goals. We have the things that we need to accomplish. We create systems where I can check in and see what those things are. But other than that, we're not doing anything new, right? Because this in and of itself is a process. In fact, we have a goal-setting operation within our company, and my only goal was the fundraise. It was literally our objective and key result on my end was CareAcademy will raise $7 to $9 million by X date, right? And so that to me was the thing that was an imperative, was goal setting, and because I am goal oriented, and I imagine you all are too, right? You're ambitious entrepreneurs. Watch your bank account. It's not the CFO watching the bank account. It's not your co-founder watching the bank account. It's you watching the bank account, right? Know exactly down to the dollar and how long that will last. I am always still shocked at how much money dwindles out of bank accounts, but make sure you're hyper attuned to that and update your board regularly. So that's what I mentioned earlier. So I also have book recommendations. I'm happy to share more, but here for me, the essential was Brad Feld's Venture Deals. He just recently came up with another version, a recent version, and that book has been tremendous. We were a Techstars company, Brad Feld's associated with Techstars, in terms of how do you soft circle, how do you create momentum. That is an absolute read. There are lots of blogs, but Brad Feld's Venture Deals is absolutely key.
Hey, Helen, I'm going to jump in with a check. Do you want to open up the questions? I know you have more slides.
Yeah.
But up to you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, let's go ahead and open it up to questions. I'll stop there, and then maybe there's certain questions that will lead up to some of the points I'm bringing up.
Awesome. We have some great questions. We've teed up a few. The first is from Kang, but he or she is in a noisy space, so has asked us to read on their behalf. The question, which I think is an important one for early stage founders, and love your perspective around kind of thinking about balancing valuation and dilution as you raise multiple rounds kind of pre that Series A raise. How are you thinking about optimizing for valuation, not raising ahead of your revenue, protecting your own ownership, protecting employee pools, all those things? It's a big calculation that you have to get right. So I'm wondering how you managed that, how you navigated that. Who did you lean on for feedback as well?
Yeah, I certainly not just your board, right? I love them. I'm sure some of my board is actually on this call right now, but I love them to absolute death. But this conversation around valuation was actually best had with other entrepreneurs, right? So part of my process, my fundraising process, and by the way, make these things an inherent part of your fundraising process. I had a conversation with someone who had raised a Series A within the last 3 months every single week while we were fundraising, because I wanted to hear from them how they track back into their valuation. I believe that a valuation for us, sort of how we arrived at it, is one, obviously, the need for the capital. If you can, in your estimation, as an early stage company, the fast rule is the longer you can go, if you have a sure thing and the longer you can go without the actual capital, then the higher the valuation, the higher you can kind of position your valuation. What folks are going to look for as they're talking valuation on the investor side is going to be around comps. We had a set of comps of companies who had verticals that were in verticals very similar to ours and had recently raised as well. But I think it's a balance, right? It's a balance of what feels achievable, what are other entrepreneurs or other folks in your segment or your vertical, and your vertical and your segment best doing, and educating yourself on what seems within reason. There are a lot of really great articles in terms of valuation setting. What does it stand right now? What does the market stand right now? Pillar VC has a couple really great recommendations around that. I think so. If anything, valuation is always very specific, but you should know that, and you should arm yourself with that knowledge. When we raised our A, part of the conversation with our lead investor leaned heavily on comps and also, what is, from a revenue projection standpoint, where does the company think it can do, as well as a multiple on that revenue. So I think it's all contextual based, but arm yourself with comps and talk to other entrepreneurs.
No, that's great advice. The second question, I'm going to turn it over to Ankit to ask about some of the reasons why you're funded at the seed round, but I'll turn it over to him.
Great, thanks. Helen, congratulations Your story is very inspiring, and I especially love how organized you are and how you're kind of, kind of going step by step, hitting your goals. My question was really about your seed round, which you raised, of course, very early in the life of your company. And during your seed round, there's a lot of unknowns. You probably haven't established product market fit. You don't know how much you're going to charge, etc. So there's just a lot of unknowns, and you're asking investors to, essentially bet on your vision, your idea, and you're trying to convince them. And so my question was just, in your opinion, or rather, what do you believe were the top, top 3 reasons or top N reasons that you believe your investors invested in you for your seed round?
Yeah, that's a great pragmatic question. If I had to point to anything, because I had conversations after we were done with the seed round, it was the market, so the market opportunity and the team. And at the end of the day, you only want investors around you who believe that between the market and the team, the CEO and the person we're handing a check to and strategic leadership to has all the right makings of someone who is thinking big about the opportunity and who has the sheer will to build the company that they envision. Those are really, we can talk all day about, companies achieving a certain level of, like, the metrics, but those don't really exist. And I'm finding that not only for ourselves, but even now for companies that I mentor. And I really strongly suggest everyone not only talk to companies ahead of you, I make a point to also talk to companies who are just coming up. It helps me learn about what the market looks like, and also how to give good advice or decent advice. But it's only about those 3 things. What is the opportunity ahead? Who's the team building it? And the person who we're entrusting with, building this company, do they have the strategy right? Can they set the strategy? Can they keep money in the bank? And can they can they get other people on board, right? Those are the only real things that, and you all are at Sparrow can tell me if I'm right or wrong, or even if it boils down to that. But in my estimation, it really boils down to that for us and for other companies that I've observed. It's really, that's all you have at that point. Series A is a whole other story that I'm sure Series B is also another story as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. I'm going to pop it over to Satvik, has a great question.
1 second. Hi, Helen.
Hi,
talk is amazing.
How are you?
I'm good. My question was, I love the story you had. And of course, we all use our stories, for our fundraising. But did you use your story as part of your sales process, especially to larger corporates? And how did you do that if you did that?
Let me make sure I understand your question, Satvik. Did I use my story as part of the fundraising process?
As part of sales, especially to larger companies.
Oh,
and
yeah.
how did you incorporate that?
Yeah, so absolutely, right. So with the deal that I talked to, I'm not going to name any names because I realize it's also possibly being recorded. But the company that went with us actually had the opportunity to go work with a multi-billion-dollar company that was a competitor elsewhere, right? And the reason, corporates, people want to work with you. Just have that mindset as an entrepreneur, because between, Silicon Valley and lionizing the story of Apple, startups are really sexy, right? And so just even the shine of startup makes people really interested in what you're doing, right? Because if you're coming as a startup, you already are building something that could be potentially better than the established thing. So sit in that and love it, like lean into it, right? And so for us, it was telling the story of being a part of building something and building the company with us. that I think really attracted a lot of our early customers. They love startups because they know if they call me and like don't set boundaries, but if they call me at 11 p.m., I'm going to be responsive. The company of our competitor, the CEO he's a great guy, but he's probably at a golf course somewhere, right? And so sell that up, sell your lack of corporatization up, because startups are flexible, they're fast, people enjoy those aspects, and even if you're selling to corporates. Now, don't be sloppy necessarily, but if anything, play up your story as, you know, your sheer will. People want to support you. People want to be in your corner. One, because you're not threatening, right? As a startup entrepreneur today, we're not threatening to most of the corporations we work with, but they know they work well with us because we will work harder for them than a lot of companies. So absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Helen. We got, I think, time for one or two more questions, but I'm going to pop it over to Shelly. Shelly, are you on? There you are.
Hi, I'm so happy to see a Black female founder. We all know what the statistics are.
Yes.
Less than 1/10 of 1% or whatever gets funded. So I just wrote it in the question is, how did you overcome being Black? I know it's a numbers game and you had to see a lot more people than the rest of them might have to, but can you talk about that numbers game and how did you find your tribe, or, you know, like how did you, it's hard.
Yeah. Well, it's always in the story, right? And I used to be an English teacher, so indulge me here. I don't think I don't have to overcome being Black, right? In fact, if anything, I embrace being Black, right? As a company who's positioned in caregiving, caregivers look like me, right? So what I was saying as part of my sales pitch, and this is, the thing is there's really great research on this, but not being deficit-minded, always optimizing and leveraging for your difference is absolutely key, no matter who you are and where you come from, right? I that's absolutely key. And so going in with that mindset has helped us tremendously. So the great question earlier, Southwick's question earlier about, did I tell my story to large corporates? I absolutely did. I told them, I know today 70% of the folks who work with you and make you millions upon millions of dollars look like me. I've done the work before, so wouldn't it stand to reason that I know best than all these other people how to create and develop a product that would be most engaging to the people who run your business, right? So for me, it's leaning into that. And the folks who couldn't see that are not necessarily the people that I want around me. And that's exactly it. I think telling your story actually helps you find your tribe. Telling our story is actually what led us to having a lead investor who had a thesis around the kind of company we're building before we met them, right? That's awesome. It meant also finding a lead investor that's run by a Black woman and so knows for a lot of the same challenges as well, right? And embracing that. So I say this to everyone, and I mean everyone, especially people who sit in intersectionality, especially Black folks who have that margin upon margin and margin of opportunity to raise. Hopefully things will change coming out of this year, is to lean into your difference. It's not something to overcome or to compensate for. And the thing is also, I'll let you know this, I'm surprised by this, right? That after the process, success begets success. So the people who were fortunate enough to come into the round or whatever that may be, they have to take a second look because someone found it valuable to come, right? And you walk in that success, right? You always walk in the value of who you are and the line of sight that you have, and everything really kind of takes care of itself. But don't ever see yourself or your story as something to overcome, right? It is the difference maker. It is a place of margin. So I could talk all day about that. I love talking about that stuff, but yeah.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.